With this model, we were interested in both capturing the framing of the way that disability is represented, as well as looking at how that framing has changed over time. The quote at the bottom there really illustrates how powerful some of this social framing can be, looking at the example of being greeted at a party or a conference, not by hello, but by do you need any help? So looking at almost every aspect of someone's personality being attributed to a disability. That comes from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. When we look at the changing models of understanding and representing disability, we see that the earlier models are really based on a medical model. Here looking at using words like mental retardation, impairment, handicap, compensation, and correction. Those are the types of language that's used regarding disability. And that model has then evolved into the social model, which really was looking at disability as a relational environment, looking at how the individual and the social environment relate. You see that let's start changes in language to phrases like systemic barriers, exclusion, empowerment, well-being, inclusion, flexible work, things like that that represent that social nature of the model. And the more recent model, and where we're at today, is really that human rights model, with the idea that people with disabilities have rights that are common to all across society. And it's really about redefining the way that we treat people with disabilities as citizens that have rights that are fully equal and can participate in our society. So when we visualize this on a tracking model, we can see that we're taking these data, searching this from Google, from other instances in the corpus where we see references, and we plot this over time, we can see phrases, the incidence of phrases looking at disability as a medical issue, sort of peaking in the 70s and then continuing to move down after that. The social issue model, that sort of started to rise up in the 70s, around the UN Declaration of the Rights of the Mentally Retarded Persons, and then moved up, and disability as a human rights issue is where we are today, although that is still taking ground. When we look at some of the dates and some of the key dates around conventions and acts and regulations that were passed worldwide, you can see those changes even from the wording in the acts. So in 1971, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Mentally Retarded Persons, even that phrase is really using the medical model as a description there. And as we start to move into more in the present time, we see human rights and disabled persons, we see a Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the Equality Act, the Disability Discrimination Act. So we start to see that not only the language that's used in society is changing, but even the way that we're describing the acts that are impacting people with disabilities are changing. This is a fairly simple prototype. If we look at an example here, a screenshot from Google Trends and Google Compare, this allows us to compare terms like inclusion and equality over time. The Google data, in this case, only goes back to 2005, but we can see those relative incidences and that tracking over time. These letters here actually relate and point to specific articles and news headlines that are using those terms. And we can even get in more detail in seeing where those terms are coming from, where the stories are coming from worldwide, and what related terms have been found. So we find this is a very useful way to not only help people that are in a social innovation lab start to understand the overall framing of how the issue is being presented, but tracking that over time and looking at how the potential solutions that we may employ relate to those narrative frames.